is our last ordinary people little exercise. We've been doing this one will be a little bit different since it's the last one. And then we'll do a little review like we did last time. Maybe we'll play a little Kahoot. Everyone seemed to get a kick out of that. So today, this is fun. This is our last theory. This is the last theory that you'll learn about. I'm not sure if I saved the best for last. Probably not. It's solution-focused therapy. It's sort of in the same camp as narrative. It's considered, I guess, one of those new age I don't know why we even use those words. It's just newer. It's a newer model of therapy that people use. And that's pretty much what we're going to tackle today. Any questions? So 1, 2, 3, let's make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 of you in this room. At some point, we'll do a little background stuff first before we actually even get to solution-focused therapy. But at some point, maybe in about 20 minutes or so, I'm going to need 4 of you to be therapists and 4 of you to be just ordinary you. You don't even need to change yourself. You're not going to play a character. You're literally just going to be you. So just think, if you'd like to have a conversation as a therapist, you can volunteer. You can raise your hand. There are only 6 people here on Tuesday, so I had 3 people. I didn't have to pick anybody. 3 people just raised their hands and said, I'll do it. So if there's 4 of you sitting out there, remember the role plays I've talked to you about? We're not really doing it because in the grand sense, we would go to the counseling room and all watch behind the one-way mirror and that sort of thing. But instead of doing that, I'll just have you guys work together. So it's a little bit of a role play experience. It's not as in-depth. 4 of you to be therapists, think about it. You got about 20 minutes to decide. It's not painful. I mean, and in fact, it's actually scripted. So anyway, just think about that. So let's get started. And actually, what we're going to start with is not solutions. We're actually going to start with negativity, a different kind of negative feedback loop. But you can call this solution-focused therapy. This is just kind of where we're starting, kind of from the back door. Because I guess to understand the importance of solution-focused therapy and the inspiration for it, you need to understand a little bit about the power of negativity and why negativity can be so contagious, both with yourself and also in relationships. The first thing to write down, starting, so people from Team A are watching, so it's sound confusing to them because this is where we started. But the first thing to write down is, and this might sound pessimistic, but when it comes to human beings and our interactions, negativity and positivity are both powerful forces. But unfortunately, when we've studied it in human relationships, negativity is a little bit more powerful. Doesn't mean positivity can't win, and the good side can defeat the dark side. We'll get to more on that later, but it turns out with human relationships, negativity is a little bit more powerful. In other words, what we're saying is a single dose of negativity has more strength to it in that relationship than a single dose of positivity. It takes a little bit more to balance the scales. Oh, great. Now there's an odd number in the room. I knew this would happen. It's okay. We had an odd number on Tuesday, too. You just ruined it. No, you didn't. Sorry. It's everyone else, actually, not you. The other thing about negativity is that as human beings, we have a tendency to focus more and remember negativity more than we do positivity. We actually have to work harder at remembering positive things. So what a great way to start today. So negativity is more powerful in human relationships than positivity. And personally, as human beings, and again, we're all different. So maybe one of you out there is like, not me. But in general, human beings have an easier time recalling negative experiences than positive experiences. And we remember them. You don't believe me. I don't know why you wouldn't believe me at this point. Here's someone else talking about it just for a little bit, just to get the wheels spinning in the right direction.
Gosh, I wish I could dance, but I can't, and you really don't want me to. So instead, I thought I would talk a little today about how people think. I'm fascinated by this question. I'm a social psychologist, which basically means I'm a professional people watcher. So this is what I do. I try to figure out how humans think and how we might be able to think better. And here's something I noticed a few years ago about how I seem to think. Here's a typical week in my life, which usually seems to revolve entirely around publishing papers. So here I am in the maximum of my artistic abilities as a stick figure, going along at baseline, and a paper gets accepted. I get this rush, this blip of happiness, and then I'm back to baseline by about lunchtime. A few days later, a paper might get rejected, and that feels pretty awful. And I wait for that flip to end, but somehow I just can't stop thinking about it. And here's the craziest part. Even if another paper gets accepted the next day, well, that's nice, but somehow I can't get that pesky rejection out of my head. So what is going on here? Why does a failure seem to stick in our minds so much longer than a success? Well, together with my colleague, Amber Boydston in the political science department, I started thinking about this question of do our minds get stuck in the negative? We all know intuitively that there are different ways of thinking about things. The same glass, the saying goes, can be seen as half full or half empty. And there's a lot of research in the social sciences showing that depending on how you describe the glass to people, as half full or half empty, it changes how they feel about it. So if you describe the glass as half full, this is called a gain frame because you're focusing on what's gained, then people like it. But if you describe the same glass as half empty, a loss frame, then people don't like it. But we wondered, what happens when you try to switch from thinking about it one way to thinking about it another way? Can people shift back and forth, or do they get stuck in one way of thinking about it? Does one of these labels, in other words, tend to stick more in the mind? Well, to investigate this question, we conducted a simple experiment. We told participants in our experiment about a new surgical procedure, and we randomly assigned them to one of two conditions. For participants in the first condition, the first group, we described the surgical procedure in terms of gains. We said it had a 70% success rate. And for participants in the second group, we described the procedure in terms of losses. We said it had a 30% failure rate. So it's the exact same procedure. We're just focusing people's attention on the part of the glass that's full or the part of the glass that's empty. Perhaps unsurprisingly, people like the procedure when it's described as having a 70% success rate, and they don't like it when it's described as having a 30% failure rate. But then we added a twist. We told participants in the first group, you could think of this as a 30% failure rate. And now they don't like it anymore. They've changed their minds. And we told participants in the second group, you could think of this as a 70% success rate, but unlike the first group, they stuck with their initial opinion. They seemed to be stuck in the initial loss frame that they saw at the beginning of the study. We conducted another experiment. This time we told participants about the current governor of an important state who is running for re-election against his opponent. We again had two groups of participants, and we described the current governor's track record to them in one of two ways. We said that when the current governor took office, statewide budget cuts were expected to affect about 10,000 jobs. And then half the participants read that under the current governor's leadership, 40% of these jobs have been saved. And they like the current governor. They think he's doing a great job. The rest of the participants read that under the current governor's leadership, 60% of these jobs have been lost. And they don't like the current governor. They think he's doing a terrible job. But then, once more, we added a twist. For participants in the first group, we reframed the information in terms of losses. And now they didn't like the current governor anymore. And for participants in the second group, we reframed the information in terms of gains. But just like in the first study, this didn't seem to matter. People in this group still didn't like the current governor. So notice what this means. Once the loss frame gets in there, it sticks. People can't go back to thinking about jobs saved once they thought about jobs lost. So in both of these scenarios, actually, the current governor gets ousted in favor of his opponent. Well, at this point, we were getting curious. Why does this happen? Could it be that it's actually mentally harder for people to convert from losses to gains than it is for them to go from gains to losses? So we conducted a third study to test how easily people could convert from one frame to another. This time, we told participants, imagine there's been an outbreak of an unusual disease and 600 lives are at stake.
She made this talk a year and a half ago. Is she a prophet? Did you hear what she just said? Imagine there's an outbreak of mysterious disease. Yeah, exactly. By the way, what she's talking about has a lot of real relevance today. I mean, we all want to get back to like not wearing masks, right? And of course, if something happens with the vaccine, it's sort of like an emergency stop. We've got to hit the pause button. But now you've got people freaking out over the Johnson & Johnson shot, and they get the email from Mount Union saying, we're pausing because of this. And because all we hear about in the news, and you see in the news, is 6 cases and 1 death has happened. You know how many shots have been given from the Johnson & Johnson shot? 7 million. So you're talking about 6 people out of 7 million shots. In fact, if you didn't know, your chances of getting struck by lightning are actually twice as likely than having some kind of reaction from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But, you know, we hear that the scary part, the negative stuff, and that's where our brains get locked in, and we have a hard time shifting out of that. So whenever this news comes in, it's like, just tack on another month to wear a mask. It's going to take 30 more days for people to get better shots.
And we asked participants in one group, if 100 lives are saved, how many will be lost? And we asked participants in the other group, if 100 lives are lost, how many will be saved? So everyone just has to calculate 600 minus 100 and come up with the answer of 500. But whereas people in one group have to convert from gains to losses in order to do that, people in the second group have to convert from losses to gains. We timed how long it took them to solve this simple math problem. And what we found was that when people had to convert from gains to losses, they could solve the problem quite quickly. It took them about 7 seconds on average. But when they had to convert from losses to gains, well, now it took them far longer, almost 11 seconds. So this suggests that once we think about something as a loss, that way of thinking about it tends to stick in our heads and to resist our attempts to change it. What I take away from this research and from related research is that our view of the world has a fundamental tendency to tilt toward the negative. It's pretty easy to go from good to bad, but far harder to shift from bad to good. We literally have to work harder to see the upside of things. And this matters. So think about the economy. Here's economic well-being from 2007 to 2010. You can see it tanked, just like we all remember. And then by late 2010, it had recovered by most objective measures. But here's consumer confidence over the same time period. You can see it tanks right along with the economy, but then it seems to get stuck. Instead of rebounding with the economy itself, consumers seem to be psychologically stuck back there in the recession. So oddly then, it may take more effort to change our minds about how the economy is doing than to change the economy itself. On a more personal level, what this research means to me is that you have to work to see the upside. Literally, this takes work. This takes effort. And you can practice this. You can train your mind to do this better. There's research out of UC Davis showing that just writing for a few minutes each day about things that you're grateful for can dramatically boost your happiness and well-being and even your health. You can also rehearse good news and share it with others. We tend to think, right, that misery loves company, that venting will help get rid of our negative emotions, that we'll feel better if we just talk about how terrible our day was. And so we talk. We talk about the boss who's driving us crazy and the friend who never called us back and the meeting at work where every little thing that could go wrong did. But we forget to talk about the good stuff. And yet that's exactly where our minds need the most practice. So my husband, who has this disconcerting habit of listening to what I say other people should do and then pointing out that technically speaking, I'm a person too, has taken to listening to me for about 2 minutes on days when I come home all grumpy and complaining about everything. And he listens and he says, okay, but what happened today that was good? And so I tell him about the student who came up to me after class with this really interesting, insightful question. And I tell him about the friend who emailed me out of the blue this morning just to say hello. And somewhere in the telling, I start to smile. And I start to think that maybe my day was pretty decent after all. I think we can also work in our communities to focus on the upside. We can be more aware that bad tends to stick. One mean comment can stick with somebody all day, all week even. And bad tends to propagate itself, right? Somebody snaps at you and you snap back, and you snap at the next guy too. But what if the next time somebody snapped at you, you forgave them? What if the next time you had a really grumpy waitress, you left her an extra large tip? Our minds may be built to look for negative information, to hold on to it. But we can also retrain our minds if we put some effort into it and start to see that the glass may be a little more full than the initially thought. Thank you.
So, just remembered I forgot. Yep. One moment. Where is it at? Here we go. So what in the world does this have to do? Not dentist. There we go. What does this have to do with relationships in the world of marriage and family therapy? Well, the next thing to write down is a name. And that name is John Gottman. And maybe some of you have watched it already. Maybe you have not. But there's an online thing to watch this week too, like usual. Something from a guy by the name of John Gottman. A lecture he gave, well, it's more of a talk that he gave, but it's a little fascinating, called The Science of Love. So that's on your own. So who in the world is John Gottman? He's the one that really showed a light on the power of negativity in married couples specifically. This is how John Gottman operated in the beginning. So he was becoming well known, at least he was well known where he was as a really good therapist for couples. So getting in to see him was not easy. Let's pretend you're in a relationship and you're having some difficulty. And so you're excited because you finally got in to John Gottman's clinic, and you know you're going to see the great John. So you come in, your appointment's at, say, 4 o'clock. So you're a nice couple, you're going to get there at 3:45. You get there early because you know there's probably paperwork and stuff like that. So you get there at 3:45, and you sit down in a kind of a tiny-ish waiting room, and there's a little knock on the door, and they say, "Thanks for coming. Just to let you know, John is with a couple that's having a crisis right now, but we should be finished on time. You should be good to go." So, like, oh, but you understand. So, okay, John's doing his thing. So the minutes tick by, and 4 o'clock comes, and 4 o'clock passes, and you're thinking, now, wait a second, our appointment's at 4 o'clock. What you don't know is there's also someone behind the scenes slowly turning up the temperature inside that tiny little waiting room at the end. So it's getting a little warmer and a little warmer. And there's another knock at the door, and the lady comes back, and she says, "I'm really sorry. John's still with that couple. He should be done within 5 or 10 minutes." And you're looking at the clock, and it's already after 4, and you got other things to do later in the day. And then she throws in, "Oh, by the way, he'll still need to end at 5 o'clock with you. He has other things to do." Wait a second, what? So this woman is saying things that's getting you a little ticked off, and now you're frustrated. I mean, you're already frustrated with your partner, whoever it is. And what you don't know is they're also turning up that temperature, really, just a little bit. So it's getting warmer in there, and you don't know what's going on. What you don't know is that John Gottman's actually been watching you since you pulled into the parking lot. And now he's been watching you through cameras inside the waiting room, and he's doing this to you entirely on purpose, without telling you. What he's trying to do is to put you, kind of like Mnuchin did. Remember Salvador Mnuchin? He would do these things called enactments with families. He would try to get to see what they're really like at home inside the clinic. Well, this is more or less what John Gottman's doing, because he believes, like a lot of people believe, which I think is somewhat true, is that you really see how people treat each other when they're arguing, when they're under stress. That's when reality sort of gets revealed. So he would do these kind of things. It's not the only thing he would do, but he would do these things to people just to kind of see how people treat each other when they're at their worst, because that's what he thought was reality. And by doing this is a true number. This isn't made up, and this is kind of what his talk is about. He's able to predict with 90% accuracy whether or not a couple is on their way to getting divorced or not, based off of 4 specific behaviors that the couple might do. 90% accuracy. And that's not made up. In other words, there were 4, through watching hours and hours and hours of couples and partners and analyzing them again, there were 4 specific behaviors that partners could do to each other. And if they did them, this couple was 90% likely to end up getting divorced, unless they work to change it. That's the good news. Because he would point these out to them and like, look, if you don't change these things, these 4 things, you're going to get divorced. I mean, there's a 10% chance you won't, but you're very likely to. And this is what John Gottman became famous for, because he wrote a book, and it had a really catchy, sexy theme to it, which sells books on the New York Times bestseller list, and it was called The 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Has anyone ever heard of the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse? I guess this is like an artistic picture of them. Does this ring a bell? I mean, it doesn't ring a bell at all. It's something from the Bible. The 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. I think it's at the end, the sequel. So the 4, you don't need to write this down at all, but the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse is a fairly well-known symbolic concept. They're supposed to like be harbingers of the end times, of the end of the world. It's like, I actually don't know what they all are. I think one is disease, so I guess we got that one. There's like famine, war, and something else. But they're supposed to be 4 harbingers of the end of the world. But put it that way. So this is so people, when people hear the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, that sounds, right? That's a pretty powerful title. So that sells a lot of stuff. It turns out, though, John really found 5 things. That's why I kept saying 5, if you're wondering what the hell's wrong with Dr. Meyer. But 5 Horsemen of the Apocalypse doesn't sound quite as good, and it's not as catchy. It kind of ruins the picture a little bit, because there is no 5th Horseman of the Apocalypse. So really there's 5 behaviors. So what in the world are they? Well, we'll get to them. So what did he see that predicted divorce? And I guess this is also just good information for you. 4 different types of negativity that were putting couples in a lot of trouble.
So selfish. You're so selfish. What an idiot. It's not my fault we're always late. Forget it. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling.
Since they're up there, I guess we might as well start. See, even when the Gottman Institute makes their catchy videos, they never mention the 5th horse, because it doesn't fit. They're still stuck on this. But anyway, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Sorry, got a little blurry there, but that's what you didn't catch on. Oh yeah, see, now I understand the code. And I don't want to assume we all understand exactly what these mean, but so what are we talking about here? When couples, if a partner is being critical to you, what are they doing to you? So what does John see in these relationships? Hey, usually what your handwriting looks like?
Yeah.
Got it. Whatever.
Oh, I see.
Did you really? Oh my god!
Oh my god!
I'm going to Corsi now, right now. I don't think that's my image of you. You really? So if you didn't catch on, criticism is purposely tearing someone down in an emotional way. So we actually have a better word for it. It's called negative affect. It's literally just psychologically tearing someone down. You might not do it on purpose. You might not even be aware of it. That's actually the thing with these couples is, I mean, they probably know their arguments aren't going anywhere. They know that their arguments aren't productive. They know they're not getting resolved. But what they're not necessarily keenly aware of are the subtle things they're doing to each other. And what John would do is he would show them the tape. Look how you argue. This is how you communicate to one another. And he would point out all of these instances, and that's what you'll see in the Science of Love tape. He's tracked these couples, and it's just mind-boggling how much he studied them. And he ends up with different categories like couples that are in trouble but will not get divorced, couples that are in trouble and are definitely headed towards divorce. Like it's crazy. So criticism is one of them. The second C is actually the most important one. So they're all important. And if they're all four there, it's really bad. And in fact, you can't really tease out one. If one is there, it sort of eventually leads to the other. So it's not like you can just, this is a critical part. No. Because one, they sort of feed each other. But the second one, contempt, this is the one that was most directly related to a lack of stability in the marriage. If your partner shows contempt to you, it's a little bit different than getting in trouble in court. What do you suppose? What does that mean? I guarantee you've had someone display contempt towards you, and you've probably done it to someone else too. And so you felt perhaps why this might be so powerful. Any ideas? Melissa, anything? Any ideas?
No.
Has anyone ever rolled their eyes at you when you're talking? How does that make you feel? Or if I'm going, what do you think about that? See what they're doing? Process question. Silver bowling with Bowenian therapy. So you guys are experts now. You could probably take the MFT licensure quiz and pass it. I'm actually not lying, because it's all this stuff. So how does it feel when someone, and I don't mean, maybe they usually come back with like, I didn't roll my eyes. Did you roll my eyes at me? Like, no, I didn't. I was just looking up. No, you didn't. You rolled my eyes. No, I didn't. That makes things even better. So when someone rolls their eyes at you, what does that communicate to you? Because that's the core of this.
They're like over it.
Yeah, keep going. Now, how do you feel? There we go. So it makes you feel kind of like less than, maybe a little inferior. Like, so there's two major ways that contempt gets shown in relationships, and one is eye rolling. Actually, that's usually the major one that people complain about. When someone rolls their eyes at you, what they're communicating to you is everything you just said is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's why when people get mad, when people roll their eyes at them, because it makes them feel inferior. Or it leads to them. I shouldn't say it makes them. This feeling is a choice. It's a choice. And the second easiest way this gets shared between partners is sarcasm. Now, sarcasm can also be fun if it's a thing between partners and that's just what the relationship is like. But in an argument, sarcasm is typically not welcomed by partner A or partner B because it communicates the same message. You think what I just said is dumb. You're not taking me, and this is how it comes out in arguments is you're not taking me seriously. You're not listening to me. That's exactly what it sounds like. So contempt, inevitably, criticism and contempt usually lead to the other two. Defensiveness, you kind of know what this is. Defensiveness is not taking responsibility for what's going on. That's why the one thing was, it's your fault, we're always late. So it's shifting the blame to someone else. And of course, stonewalling is when someone just shuts off and completely stops communicating. So it's fairly easy intuitively to see how one of these leads to the other, and it sort of becomes this vicious cycle of negativity. And I might as well just toss it out here to go back to the first thing that she wrote down. John Gottman studied this, still does, for years, decades. And he ended up coming up with what's known in MFT as the piggy bank ratio. This is actually just something from communication, not necessarily family therapy. This is the ratio of power between negativity and positivity in human relationships. This is true in marriage relationships. This is true in teacher-student relationships. And this is true in coaching relationships, from coaches to athletes. So let's just pull out of marriage for a second. If a coach, and I don't just mean like constructive criticism, like, it would help if your form was a little better. No, sometimes coaches just tear into their athletes, and they're just nasty. Every time that happens, it's going to take 5 positive comments from that coach to make up for that one negative comment internally in the athlete. Same is true in marriages. So in human relationships, on average, negativity is 5 times as powerful as positivity, which is why these behaviors can become so toxic inside marriages. The good news is they can change, but she's correct. It takes a lot. It's work to steer the ship back. And this is why people come to therapy more than just once and learn something and somehow become this new, right? So 5-1. Well, we'll finish. I probably should have just let you watch this. We'll finish this and then we'll move on to our theory and then we'll get on.
Dr. John Gottman calls these negative communication patterns the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse because they'll lead to the end of your relationship. In fact, he can predict this relationship failure with over 90% accuracy if the behavior isn't changed. So, what can you do? Well, at the Gottman Institute, we understand you might not even know you're communicating this way, or you might not know how to control it. But if you practice the following 4 research-based antidotes, there is hope for your future. Criticism attacks the character of the recipient instead of focusing on a specific behavior. The antidote to criticism is to talk about your feelings using I statements, then express a positive need. Contempt is an expression of superiority that comes out of sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, mockery, and hostile humor. Contempt is the greatest predictor of relationship failure and must be eliminated. The antidote to contempt is to treat one another with respect and build a culture of appreciation within the relationship. Defensiveness is self-protection through righteous indignation or playing the victim. Defensiveness never solves the problem and is really just an underhanded way of blaming your partner. The antidote to defensiveness is to accept responsibility, even if only for part of the conflict. Stonewalling occurs when the listener withdraws from the conversation without resolving anything. It takes time for the negativity created by the first 3 horsemen to result in stonewalling, but when it does, it can become a habit. The antidote to stonewalling is to break for at least 20 minutes. Calm down, then return to the conversation. Spare your relationship from certain destruction. Learn more about eliminating the 4 horsemen by visiting our site.
We're just taking a class. So let's get some more of this. So horses, no, I guess we already went over that. Horses are piggy banks. So solution-focused therapy. And maybe, do I have 4 volunteers or we'll still stick with 4, it's fine. Maybe 1, are you raising your hand? So I might have to pick 3 other people, but we'll see. But let's get over the basic premise first of solution-focused therapy and what it is. It's actually incredibly simplistic, so we'll have no trouble getting through this today. But a couple things. First, well, I guess the first thing's not even up there. Solution-focused therapy, and of course I said that out loud on Tuesday and never went back and put it up there, but that's okay. That's why you're here live. The first thing to know about solution-focused therapy is it's known as a brief therapeutic model. What that means is it's designed to get you in and out of therapy within, I would say, 7 to 10 sessions. Just like any other theory, solution-focused therapy is not for everything. It's not a cure-all for every couple's problems, and it's not going to work for every couple's problems. It works really well when there is a easily definable goal that a couple wants to reach, and there's not some kind of long history of abuse or trauma or that sort of thing. So it's really designed, and it does, for what it works really well. It's designed to work for problems in the here and now that are easily definable, and you got a motivated client. So is it for everyone? No. Every problem? No. But when it is efficacious to you, I used efficacious in the sentence out loud today. It works really well for what it's designed for, put it that way. Because as we talk about this, you might start thinking, I'm not sure if this would work for my own problem, because that goes way back. So the second thing is actually up here. And this might be related to what I just said. Solution-focused therapists, I don't say they wouldn't care about it, it's just not part of the therapy. Exploring the cause or the root of the problem is not a part of the therapeutic process at all. That's going to take way too much time. So for them, that this just isn't important. And people are kind of split on this. Some people think you've got to find the root of the problem or you're never cure. You're never going to. But other people, I don't know how important that actually is. Let's just get it over with. So the cause of the root of the problem is really not important. Solution-focused therapy also believes, sort of like the Good Witch at the end of The Wizard of Oz, you've had the power all along. People are capable by themselves of changing themselves. They need a little bit of help from the therapist, but the therapist isn't some kind of like magical guru that's going to feed them something that will change them. You just got to figure out how you're going to do this. This is related to the third one that's up there. Is the therapist's job is to help the client unlock strengths and tools the client already has. So I don't really need to teach you anything. I'm not going to sit down with you and teach you about differentiation of self and all this stuff. But you've got this. The solution might be something I, as a therapist, haven't even thought about. But we'll get there together. Solution-focused therapists also believe that something they call exceptions happens in the person's life. I use the same example that I used on Tuesday. I'll just write it down. You don't need to write it down. But the one person that I remember using solution-focused therapy with the most is a guy who came and called our MFT clinic. And, it was a little unexpected because we're used to hearing communication issues. This guy wasn't even married. He just wanted to stop smoking. Okay. He was an older guy, and he wanted to stop smoking. Well, it just so happened that he called our clinic during solution-focused therapy month, pretty much what was going on. Okay, well, as using this model, there's also time. It's not like this guy spends 24/7 smoking, even though he was 2 or 3 packs a day. It was like crazy smoking, like wow, big time. So not just I want to kick a little habit. It was part of his life. But that doesn't mean he spends all of his time smoking. He does other things, and in solution-focused therapy, moments when he's not. Are you done? Speaking of smoking. Sorry.
That was like the weirdest thing ever. I took like the slightest breath in, but it hit the back of my throat
And of course
so
I
fast, it like scared me.
And I had to highlight it, and that makes it even better. So there's 2 things about this. We'll call him John. His name wasn't John, but John, since he's labeling himself as a smoker, and that's what he wants to stop doing, he's not even aware of the times that he doesn't. Remember, we only remember the negative things. So 2 things about these exceptions. People are not aware that the exceptions in their life even exist. Or we go to absolutes. If you think your kid is a jerk, you label your kid, God, I hate you, you're just a jerk. You're always late, you're always doing it, and that's how we talk. And so when the kids are behaving well and not doing the quote unquote bad things, we're not even aware of it. And the second thing about this, if we do notice them, we minimize them. And we have a great difficulty recalling them because of that. We minimize them. So if I said to John, tell me about a time when you don't smoke. First, he might not even be aware of it. And then if he does, like, oh, well, I mean, that doesn't count. So he'll minimize the times that he doesn't smoke. And that's why he has a difficult time remembering them. Another example would be like parents complaining about a kid behaving badly. They might, if their kid does something good, they might be blissfully unaware of it. Like they didn't even know, oh, well, that doesn't matter because he does this all the time. So we're not aware of the exceptions. And when they do happen, we just shove them down and say, well, that's good. But the biggest thing to understand about solution-focused therapy is, I tried to explain this a little bit in the overview. There's techniques, there's certainly techniques to it, but it's not like a grand theory with a bunch of concepts. We're not going to have any glossary of concepts to give you today. Anything like, and all this is just common language. It's not like the word exception is new. Like it's just, right? We all know what an exception to a problem is. So that doesn't exist with this theory. Maybe you'll like that. It literally is a way of speaking. It's literally a different type of language. Wouldn't that be fun if it actually was? What is going on? What is going on? No, it's a different way of speaking. And people that are really into solution-focused therapy speak this way, like even when they're not in therapy. And you'll get a feel for what I'm talking about in about 5 minutes. And just an example of this, I worked, I think I told you about the little laboratory school at Ohio State when we studied attachment. Remember? Anyway, I actually worked there to pay for my tuition for 3 months. I didn't like it. But these were little kids, like 5 to 10-year-old. They would just hang out. It was like a daycare. But they trained you how to speak to these kids because they had their own, I can't remember the name, but there's like some label that goes along with this. But if a kid did something incorrectly or what you had to say to them all the time was, how does that choice that you're making right now feel? What's going on inside? Like, I think we need to make another choice. That was a huge, it's like there was like 10 things. That's the one that I remember, is you always have to tell the kid, let's stop. Let's try to make another choice because the choice you're making is not working. But you get engulfed in this like 8 hours a day, and you find yourself with your roommates like at midnight or 1 a.m, like, you should be making another choice right now. Like it's a different way of talking. So who wants to be my therapist? I've got one. And since someone came in and ruined our even numbers, no, it's okay. It's actually the person that's not here that's screwing things. So I got one therapist. It's not, trust me, it's not painful. No one's going to be watching you. I got 2. Auction. Come on down. Anybody else? The rest of you just need to have problems. That's all you have. So I got 2. You can be a therapist. Yes, you can do it. So I got 3. I'd rather not pick someone. Oh, fantastic. So my 4th therapist. All right, you come with me. The rest of you, think of, and mind you, you don't need to share things you're not comfortable sharing with someone. So what I don't want is like, oh my God, I don't want to talk about it. Don't talk about it. Remember what solution-focused therapy is. It's designed to work with easy, I don't want to use the word easy, but here and now issues, problems that you'd like to be solved. So the rest of you, while I talk to them for like 2 minutes, think of a problem that's going on. You could even make, if you don't have any problems in your life, congratulations, but feel free to make one up. But just think of anything, any problem you'd like solved. Maybe you don't want to smoke anymore. I don't know what it is, but something like that. And we'll come back and we'll get you soon. Or she. And one of you, by the way, therapists, will need to take 2 people. That's okay. We did it on Tuesday too. And they actually got done the quickest, which I found odd. But anyway, come with me. Oh, you probably bring something to write down with you. Maybe because you're a therapist and therapists take notes, right? I do. All right. I told you, you literally have a script. You don't even have the word. All right, people with problems. Tell us the one person picked you. So.
Oh boy.
Well, you probably know who it is. So come with me. Let's go fix our problems.
I know what problem I want to have yet.
All right. And when you're done, come back on Tuesday. I want everything back.
So on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 meaning you got as far as you think. You want to take things, and
and 0 meaning total opposite. Not there at all yet. So, where are we right now?
Probably a 6.
That's a 6. Yeah. Okay, Jonathan. So back right now.
I think at 1 or nothing. And
That's right. It's giving yourself to move into this direction.
Back already. We solved my problem.
It's brief.
I'm curious to see what kind of problem.
It's not a real problem.
No. Okay.
But I think was Smoker was on the board, so I was like, what?
It actually does kind of. Really well. I mean, as long as there's not some kind of like physical dependency.
Yeah.
Oh. You're not happy.
What?
You're not happy.
No, I
That ruined everything.
This year's awful.
She's been poorly trained.
If you're learning guitar late in life, there's one distinction that will determine if you're going to succeed or fail. Now,
Someone on Tuesday asked me if Star Wars is secretly the last thing we're watching. No. Oddly enough, the last Ordinary People is based off of a film called Ordinary People. Well, maybe you've heard of it. I'm not sure if you had like an Oscar-winning film, but from years ago. But it's still relevant. It's just about a family with crap happening to them. That still happens, it turns out, in 2021. So if everyone is back, let me bring this up now. Just out of curiosity, well, clients, I'm not sure if you picked a real or a fake problem. It really doesn't matter what you pick. But from the client's perspective, how did the way the therapist was talking to you feel, or what kind of answers what was your reaction to it? Put it that way. Did you notice anything? Did you not notice anything? Did it just feel like maybe it just felt like a regular conversation?
I like the questions. They made you think in a while.
They made you think?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, that's good. Social
More of
focus.
the background behind things.
That's one positive comment. Anything else? We had an alcoholic. She's not really an alcoholic, but even though it wasn't a real problem, what were the
I feel
questions?
like some of the questions she was asking was like repeating herself,
Yeah.
just in a different way.
What kind of answers did you give? You can answer for it too. You're a therapist.
She kind of just like went around the question because
Oh, typical alcoholic.
because I kind of like threw her off. And she kind of was like struck by some of the questions, so she didn't really know how the problem would be gone. She just knew one day she would wake up and she wouldn't have the urge to drink, and that's how she like knew it would be gone.
They're the best liars. Anybody else? What therapist? How did it feel talking to someone like this? And someone in the hallway picked up on it right away. Well, before we got started, one of the therapists within 30 seconds picked up on something. What did you notice? We said it right outside. 5 minutes.
did. Oh,
Oh, it was you?
Oh, I was thinking,
Never mind.
You never really asked about the problem. You just, there is no problem. There's a solution.
Did you notice as the clients that they never used the word problem once? Hopefully they didn't cheat and use that. They didn't even mention your problem. I mean, they asked you, how do you think I can help you? But other than that, it was all about, okay, what's your life going to be like when this thing doesn't exist? Like what? Like what does that even? So sometimes when you talk to clients, they have a difficult time answering these questions. But that's okay. That's actually a sign that they need asked these kinds of questions. And you're right. Some of them do seem like the same kind of question, asked in a slightly different way. But let me give you a realistic example. One of the many treatments, so there's no silver bullets, but one of the many treatments we use in therapy for people with, say, a real mental illness called depression that you probably heard of. One of the many tools that therapists use to help someone get over depression is exactly, I think her name was Allison. I think she mentioned this. It sounds simplistic and it sounds like way too good to be true, but there's actually a point in doing it. When you ask someone who's currently suffering from depression to do something as simple as, okay, over the next week, before I see you again, here's a journal. You slide, maybe it's a little brown book full of log your humor. No, we don't do that. We ask them to just every day, like look for the next 7 days. At the end of the day, all I want you to do is write down 3 positive things that happened to you that day. That's it. And it sounds like, oh, good. And they don't really understand what's going on. But when they come back the next week, well, as long as they took it seriously, there's usually very little in there. And in fact, some days there might just be one thing and they'll tell you, well, 3 good things didn't happen to me on Monday or Wednesday, which isn't true. They're just not seeing it, and they can't see it because they're currently operating with a brain that unfortunately is right now suffering from depression, and that brain works in a different way. But by doing these things, you actually change the brain and how it starts to function if you keep doing it over time. And that's kind of the point behind this. People that are, I guess, immersed and sort of chained down by their problems do have a difficult time answering these because they haven't spent 1 minute of their life thinking about what would happen if this actually didn't exist. They don't want it to be there, but they've never actually, in other words, they have a hard time visualizing a future where this doesn't exist. And that's kind of the premise behind some of these things. So you just got a taste of the language. Oh, and I guess if you weren't one of these, you'll probably want one of these because it can save you from writing down some notes. So just take one and pass them around. So if you weren't the client or you weren't the therapist, this is what the therapist had. So that's what they were armed with. They had a script. They were literally told everything to ask you. So let's get into this though. So we do have some similar themes here, just like the other therapy approaches. This one has a definition for what a normal or a healthy family looks like, or acts or behaves. Just a couple points to make. Solution-focused therapists believe, just like the PowerPoint says, that families and couples and your client is the expert on their own life. In other words, there's nothing you can teach them. You don't need to waste time teaching them anything. They're the expert on their own lives. Let's just speak the language and we'll get there. Normal, I guess, healthy families are sort of by nature, they're resourceful and they're resilient. Those are the 2 big R's that people need to be healthy. In other words, you naturally find ways to solve the issues that you'd like to be solved. You're solution builders. Yes? Resourceful and resilient. So they sort of naturally do these things. They naturally harness their own abilities to solve problems. Of course, everyone's going to get stuck every now and then. It is true. Some people, and hopefully your family has 1 or 2, some people just do have a knack for looking around things and seeing the solutions and getting other people to keep moving and solving problems. They make good managers. They make good administrators. They make good parents. They say things like, when bad things happen, like yesterday, my daughter was really pissed off the time she ran. 7th grader, come on. It's a good time. But she's like, she wanted to win. She's got the mindset. And of course you can get stuck, right? But no, we're already talking like, hey, what did you learn? Like, what did you do different today? What do you want to do different on Saturday? Like, we're already looking ahead. And that changes, right? That changes their mindset. Now they're not stuck there. Now they're already thinking about, all right, now I'm going to fix this and I'm going to do better in 2 days. So that's what we're talking about. And, oh, by the way, normal. There is no normal. There's no such thing as a family is supposed to look, even supposed to operate. If it's working for you, it's working. So in other words, there's no solution-focused therapist is not trying to change boundaries and hierarchies. It might not feel right to the therapist, but if that's the client's thing, that's their own business. So this is pretty simple. Oh, and the next one's really easy. The development of problems. This space left intentionally blank. If you didn't notice, clients, again, just remove that from your language. Solution-focused therapists do not speak of problems in the therapy room. Yes, they know they exist. So again, they're not like left of center, like mystics or something. They just don't speak to their clients in this way. They don't categorize them. Of course, you have low differentiation of self. No, that's a negative label to put on someone. One would say that's fine. Solution-focused therapists just don't operate that way. And I said out in the hallway, just so you know, this doesn't mean these therapists don't believe in mental illness, but that's not. They know that exists, but it's not part of the language that they speak. So I don't want you to get the impression that solution-focused therapy is like dismissive of, like, they're not Scientology. Again, this therapy is all about a way of speaking to people. So, but problems, no, that's just not part of it. Huge part of therapy for solution-focused therapy. In fact, I mean, it's an important part of every therapy, but this is an absolute must to do fairly quickly. I guess where Mnuchin is worried about building therapeutic alliance and joining with the family and changing his clothes for the next session. No, solution-focused therapy, right off the bat, we're all about goal setting. And it's not as easy as it sounds, because you'd think everyone comes in with therapy with a goal. No. I would say only about 30% of clients that I've had over the past 15 years come in armed with a very specific goal. They know they want to feel better. They know they want their relationship to be better. But they don't really, when you ask them, okay, well, I hope I can help you with that. What does that mean to you? What does being happy mean? Shit. Well, we haven't gotten that far. Just fix this. So, couple goals. So again, this is designed to be brief. You already have that written down. So we're looking for 7 to 10 sessions or so. We're not going to spend any time labeling, searching for flaws. We've already been over that. I'm going to jump down to the critical part, because this is the important part. It's your job as the therapist to help this client set a very specific goal. And there's 2 musts to this. And I know you've been waiting on the edge of your seat. Okay, what are these 2 things?
I can't tell you.
And I'll go back to my smoker. So, of course, I asked John the smoker, John, how do you think I can help you? I want to stop smoking. He coughed all the time. I mean, he smoked 3 packs a day. I mean, that's what he wanted. So, okay. So when I'm solution-focused mindset, so I'm not labeling as a smoker, we started talking about what his life might be like if he didn't smoke, because this is how you secretly find a goal that qualifies for the 2 musts that are up there. And it took about 15, 20 minutes or so, and you could tell he was wondering why I wasn't talking about nicotine and the chemicals and the cigarettes and things like that. It turns out John used to run. Nice, something in common with this guy. So we started talking about running, and it turned out he would really like one of the reasons he wanted to stop smoking was because he missed doing like 5Ks and things like that. And of course, smoking 3 packs a day and running don't exactly mesh. So his goal for therapy, what actually had nothing to do with smoking whatsoever. I mean, it did. We just didn't label it that way. His goal was to run a 5K. That became his goal of therapy. He's not trying to run a marathon. He's not trying to run an ultra marathon. He's not trying to run 100 miles a week. He just wants to do a frickin' 5K, right? Something we train third graders to do and girls on the run if they want to do it. So this goal meets these qualifications. It's modest, meaning it's attainable. It's very realistic. And it's also positive. Saying your goal is to stop smoking is negative because you're trying to stop doing something. That's a negative goal. Trying to do something is a positive goal. So goals in solution-focused therapy are framed in a positive way, and they're also modest and attainable. Something that you can work towards instead of something you want to get rid of. But of course, we're doing the exact same thing. You can't be a 5K runner and a 3-pack-a-day smoker at the same time. And that's how solution-focused therapists find their goals with their clients. So is alcoholic. It's not necessarily about you putting down the bottle. It's about what other things would get replaced by this. That's our goal. I'd like to spend more time with my children, like I should. Sorry. Leave her alone. So the premise behind this is actually a little bit of a cognitive, old-fashioned cognitive behavioral trick. You have to think, you have to be able to talk about something first. Talk, think, and walk. That's what they say in solution-focused therapy, but this is cognitive behavioral therapy 101. You have to be able to talk about something out loud to get it in your mind so you can think about it, and you can never do something unless you've accomplished that. So first we talk about the goals that we want, we get you thinking about it all the time, then you can go out and do it. So talk, think, and walk. These exceptions that are out there.
Why do you use that?
Right? I'm glad someone actually recognized it.
That's my favorite movie.
It's my favorite part of that movie. One foot in front of the other. I can do it. Anyway. Memories. Fuzzy memories. So the therapy climate, you probably caught on to most of this. The overall climate, you're constantly talking about how things are going to be different. That's how everything is framed. Solution-focused therapists have no interest whatsoever if you have 3 generations in the room, so this isn't Carl Whitaker doing solution-focused therapy. Remember, if you don't remember, he's the guy that would cancel your appointment if you didn't bring someone he requested you to bring. So I don't care who's there. John, if you want to bring your grandma, that's great. You think she can help you run a 5K. But if you just want to come by yourself, John, that's cool too. Again, just to read, I think this is the 3rd time, clients are the experts. In other words, people don't feel like, in other words, as a therapist, you're not putting yourself on a pedestal. The client is just another person. Like there's no hierarchy inside the therapy room. There are, however, 3 different types of people that you meet in therapy, but solution-focused therapists have a way of working with all 3 of them. I mean, this is just true in general of therapy. But they just give them labels. I guess so. I thought they weren't supposed to label anybody. Solution-focused therapist. I guess they do. One type of client you'll have in therapy are visitors. Visitors are people who do not want to be in the therapy room at all, usually sent there by someone else or brought there by someone else. So maybe a kid who doesn't want to be there. You could have a court-appointed client. That happens. So what in the world do you do with someone who doesn't even want to be there? Well, solution-focused therapy actually kind of has an answer for you. The goal of therapy is, what do you need to do to not be here anymore? Bless you. No matter what that is. Okay, so you don't want to be here. That's awesome. What do we need? What needs to be different about your life for you to not be here anymore? There you go. Then there's also the complainants. Complainants want to be there. They think there's a problem, but they're blaming everyone else. There's no personal responsibility for what's going on. My daughter's always doing this. My daughter's always doing that. This is the example your book uses, so I'm kind of going back to that. There's also a built-in solution for this. So it sounds like the way your daughter's acting is not something that you want to be happening. I'm wondering, though, what would you be doing differently? Let's pretend that your daughter is behaving exactly like you want her to behave. What would you be doing differently on those days? Oh, you're not taking away you're not even telling them they're wrong for blaming the person. You're just returning the responsibility back on them. Then, of course, your perfect ideal client, what we all want, and when you get it, you recognize it right away. Those are our customers. Those are people who are ready to change. John, the smoker, was a great customer of therapy. He just simply wanted to be doing something different. He was ready to go. He was highly motivated. Came on his own. So 3 different kinds of people that walk in the room. And then, of course, we got what you guys got a taste of. We have the techniques. And this is the language. The language has built-in techniques to it. What made solution-focused therapy famous, I guess, what people always think of. So ask anyone trained in counseling or social work or family therapy, what's one thing they remember about getting trained in solution-focused therapy? It's the question. And the miracle question is already written out for you. That's exactly what it is. And you don't just ask it once, and you can ask it in different ways, but for someone with an attainable problem, this actually works very well to get people to visualize what a goal for them might be. And this is actually how we got John. It took a little bit, by a little bit, I mean very quickly, within 15 or 20 minutes. So let's pretend, and he had, at first it just seemed weird, and you don't say it in a weird way. Okay, I want you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. Okay. Walk with me. Right? So I think when people read this, they picture someone talking that way. No, it's really simple. Just, all right, let's pretend you're not smoking 3 packs a day. That takes up a lot of your time and a lot of your money. Oh my God, I couldn't believe this, by the way. This is like a tangent. Believe it or not, I used to smoke for 6 months of my life. There was another, I know, my God. 6 months, come on, I was 19. I just tried it out once. I have an addictive, if you don't know, addictive personalities are real. And so when I drink coffee, I don't just drink coffee. I'm give me the pot. But smoking was the same way. I remember I had to try a cigarette. Oh, that's weird. And within a week, I was smoking a pack a day. Holy shit. Then I realized I'm poor and this sucks because I had no money because it was $1 or something per pack. I was behind some guy in Gitgo the other day. He bought a pack of cigarettes. It's $7. I'm from the back of my head. I'm oh my God. I thought it was bad back then. He spent $64 on cigarettes. Oh my God, dude. But anyway, I don't know why I told you that. Oh, because we're talking about John the Smoker. But the miracle question, right? Just visualize yourself. And I remember even talking to myself, this sucks. I just want to stop. So I wasn't addicted. But John is, but once we talked about this, he's well, I'd like to do a 5K. He just kind of brought it out of the blue. Boom, you got a goal. So the miracle question is just visualizing, talking about, again, talk, think, and then walk. You have to talk about what your life's going to be different so that you can start thinking about it, so that you can start attaining that new life that you'd like. This works with couples too, by the way. If you guys didn't argue all the time, what would you be doing? We'd probably be going on more dates or whatever it is people come up with. Great. The exception question, these get asked all the time. That's also written out for you. Tell me about a time when this wasn't happening. Tell me about this. And with John, this was difficult at first. He got into it. He actually started journaling moments in his day when he didn't smoke and trying to become more aware of these. But it was helpful. You got to painstakingly sometimes point these out to people. Coping questions. Now, these are strength-based questions. Coping questions are, if you didn't realize that solution-focused therapy relies a lot on positive reinforcement. So solution-focused therapists are always looking for any way they can complement their client. But a coping question is asking, like if John came in one week and said, hey, I only smoked 2, it's not my goal, but I only went through 2 packs. Like, how did you find the strength to not open up that 3rd pack? How did you do that? That's a coping question. So coping questions are asking clients about their strengths, their abilities. And you ran a whole half mile? How did you do that? And that's awesome. So coping questions, focusing on their strengths. And then we get to the scaling question, which you have an example of. And I have a short little video. I don't know why it makes me laugh. I think it's the therapist and just the way he acts. Scaling questions sound very simplistic, and the example that you got asked or the example that you asked shows you kind of how it operates. But I don't know if this is